Hello, my name is Andy Bureau, and this is my ethnographic presentation for PCS 30902 online, which will discuss the conflict between Christian-derived faiths and the LGBT community. This is an issue which is happening still today, as it happened throughout history, began by the widespread belief that homosexuality and gender nonconformity are sacrilegious, if not sinful in nature, evidenced or supported by the world's various religious texts. Consequently, this has led to oppressive and discriminatory practices being upheld by religious doctrines and institutions, oftentimes resulting in the inability of LGBT+ individuals to meet those needs found in the top 3 tiers of Maslow's hierarchy. And here just a diagram of Maslow's hierarchy, and what we're talking about is the love and belonging tier, esteem, and self-actualization. So religion can sometimes impact the ability to get those needs of intimacy, sense of connection, in love and belonging, and in esteem, that respect, status, self-esteem can affect how religion can affect how somebody sees themselves if an aspect of their identity is condemned, and self-actualization, the desire to become the most that one can be, is also impacted. And so for the proposed ethnographic research component of this project, the organization of the group I would observe and have observed some would be the Wesley Lutheran Church, located on UNCG's campus, whose manifest states that all are welcome regardless of race, creed, ability, gender identity, or orientation. And we'll come back to this in a minute, but first we'll discuss a brief history of LGBT relations with religion. So it's no secret that sexual minorities and non-gender conforming individuals have existed throughout history. So really this conflict begins with the rise of Christianity and Christianity-derived faiths, and come largely after widespread interpretation coming from the text of Genesis 19, 1 to 11, Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13, Romans 1:26-27, Corinthians 6:9, and Timothy 1:10. So, as I've said, these passages are what have supported some of these very time-honored interpretations that have lasted until present day. And because Christianity plays a large role in U.S. society, even though the United States doesn't have a national religion, Christianity is still Christianity and its derived faiths are still the most widespread, making it hard sometimes to separate religious ideology from influencing state or national legislation. And so consequently, up until a few years ago, this had prohibited homosexual marriage, and even now in 33 states, there is not clear finalized non-discrimination laws prohibiting discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation, because there is no national legislation that states it, and so it's up to state, which I think is largely influenced by these deeply ingrained religious ideologies and values that so many Americans hold. And so this influences how they're seen today. So perception by society, especially by those who identify within the same faith as these LGBT members who also identify. Um, it was a common theme throughout history, but it also continues now, that homosexuality and gender nonconformity have largely been regarded as concepts that have no place in Christianity, and as I said before, supported by those specific passages largely. That being said, some denominations, anti-LGBT sentiments have started to change in recent years, particularly within the Lutheran, Methodist, Episcopal, and Presbyterian churches, changing their stances on LGBT acceptance and representation within their own congregations. An example of these churches, as I've stated before, is the Wesley Lutheran Church, located on UNCG's campus, which we'll segue into now, talking more about the solution or really transferability plan for this issue. What I would propose is the continuation, expansion, and multiplication of LGBT inclusive churches such as Wesley Lutheran, and these would largely be led and perpetuated by those who identify as both LGBT and religious, with support from non-LGBT allies within existing religious institutions. Change would have to come from within, and consequently that would help integrate those who are actually affected by the issue, and their voices would be heard, and they'd be the one making the decisions and actually bringing in these methods of change. How this can be done, and as I have observed myself from attendance of Wesley Lutheran events and services, is to reach this atmosphere and inclusivity. It's largely built up on a foundation of acceptance, coupled with the reinterpretation of original religious texts and stories. And particularly a lot rests on inclusive language and the repetition of these ideas of acceptance, of inclusivity, of loving all people as they are and as God made them. And I think for the expansion of, or to help assist other groups, religious organizations, I think this is an easy way to do it, is possibly the sharing of particular sermons or hymns or whatnot that have this LGBT inclusive language embedded within them, and to just spread these messages, these doctrines around, to help build up a repertoire of this inclusive religious text throughout organizations. And for what I would actually be asking members of the Wesley Lutheran congregation, and what I plan on asking, things like, how do you make sense of your identity as a Christian and as a member of the LGBT community? In the past, have your experiences with other religious organizations been largely positive or negative? And please go into detail and explain with those. What does the Wesley Lutheran Church do to create a welcoming LGBT inclusive atmosphere, which I think could also help with the spreading and the assisting of other organizations, spread those ideas around. And why is it important to you that churches and religious leaders support LGBT plus inclusive programs and legislation? And how do you think the methods implemented by the Wesley Lutheran Church could be implemented on a larger scale? And in doing this, I would probably interview about 15 people, made up of both members and staff of the Wesley Lutheran congregation, as it's not a large congregation, but there's about 15 regular people that are there at most events. And finally, why I've chosen this as my my topic is because at one point or another in my life, I have identified both as Christian and as a member of the LGBT community. Granted, I no longer do so with either one of those identities, mainly just because I don't consider myself religious anymore, but more spiritual. And I have worked to try and rid myself of labels. But I'm fully aware of the challenges that are faced by the LGBT plus community. Um, I also realize that while historically religion has been used as a tool to condemn homosexuality and gender nonconformity, sentiments and opinions have been changing in recent years, and some people, as evidenced by Wesley Lutheran, and institutions have begun using religion as a tool to support and accept those identifying within the LGBT community instead of putting them down. And honestly, I think this is the best way to actually change sentiments and beliefs on a large scale. And so, thank you for listening. These are my sources if you wish to look at them as well. So yeah, once again, thank you, and signing off.